Hello, everyone. This is Yuri, aka the Yaku Cosmopolitan, and today I am joined by Jacob, who is known as the Frilled Shark online. He's been doing a lot of great content lately on his new YouTube channel. He's been a longtime supporter of mine, so I'm very grateful for that. And he is an expert on European baseball. Dude knows his stuff when it comes to the European baseball scene and a lot of other areas. We're both San Francisco Giants fans, so we share that same kind of pain. But yeah, please introduce yourself, Jacob.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jacob, or the Frilled Shark, if you please, whichever one. I'm originally from San Francisco Bay Area. I grew up for a while in Silicon Valley, kind of before it was Silicon Valley. And then I moved overseas for 8 years because of my dad's work. I went to high school in the United Kingdom, actually, and that's kind of where I first picked up my love of international baseball. I watched most of the games Samurai Japan and Kingdom of the Netherlands played at the 2017 WBC, and since then it's just been like a obsession of mine. And recently I was like, hey, I love talking about this, and there's a great community out there, and I wanted to do more with them. So I've been making videos and podcasts. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really great to have someone like you now who can actually talk in quite a bit of depth about European baseball, because obviously it's an untapped region, especially when it comes to just people who can speak about the talent there. There are great players coming out of there. Obviously, certain federations are making big gains, like the Czech Republic. They have a close connection now with Japan, thanks to the last WBC, and there's a lot of other countries there, like the Netherlands and Germany, with a rich history of baseball. So I think it's great that we can be here today to discuss this upcoming series between Samurai Japan and Team Kingdom of the Netherlands. So this is going to be taking place at Kyocera Dome in Osaka, March 5th and 6th. So that's about in 2.5 weeks from recording this. This mirrors kind of what Japan did last year when they played the All Europe All Stars, same venue, same time of the year. But obviously this time they're playing just the Netherlands, not the whole, European kind of confederation. So the last time the Dutch team played Japan for an exhibition series goes back to 2016. That's obviously when Ohtani famously hits that ball through the roof of Tokyo Dome. Kind of a famous series at this point. And the Netherlands put up a lot of runs, so they did very well, I would say, even though they lost both games. So what would you say the expectations are for Netherlands going into this series? And obviously, whether they win or lose, they're going to be, obviously Japan's favorite to win. But what would be like a good outcome for the Netherlands in this series?
Good outcome, I think, for me personally, is probably different from what they're hoping for. I'm hoping they don't pull a Team Europe and get shut out 2 games in a row. I think just putting up any amount of runs against Samurai Japan is probably going to be good for them. I'd be shocked if they won either of the games. And that's not really an indictment of the talents that the Netherlands is bringing. It's more so a reflection of how since the mid 2010s to more modern times, the level of play in MPB has just steadily increased, and the gap between MLB level talent and NPB talent has just gotten smaller and smaller. But I don't think the Netherlands national program or the talent in the Hoofdklasse has really, it's increased, but not by that much.
Yeah. Yeah, last year, game 2, Europe getting combined perfect game was definitely, that was a very special sight to behold in person. I mean, that was cool. It might be the only perfect game I ever get to see in person at any level. So that was cool for Japan, but obviously not very cool for Europe. There was, Japan was striking out 15 plus batters a game in both those. So I do think it's going to be a challenge for the hitters. The pitchers, you got guys like Tom DeBlock who have the experience. If they can hold Japan to under 7-8 runs, I think that would be a pretty decent showing for them. But yeah, speaking of the pitchers, who would be kind of the Netherlands' best arms in this series, and who are the guys that could be there for the 2026 WBC, if they have like a very good performance here, like who can increase their stock, things like that.
Yeah, so I think the first person is obviously Tom DeBlock. I would say he's probably stuff wise the best person they're bringing here. I think a bit what I was looking at when I was like just researching the roster is there's not a lot of different looks on this roster. They have one left-handed pitcher.
Yeah.
And everyone else is kind of like topping out at 90 miles an hour, if that, and like you're really only seeing above 90 from Tom DeBlock and maybe a guy like Wendell Florinis, who is actually the guy who gave up that moonshot to Ohtani through the roof in 2016. So it's kind of funny that they brought him back for this, but hopefully there's no today. Hopefully history won't repeat itself for him there. Ryan Huntington is the one left-handed pitcher. He's from Oranjestad, Aruba, and he was pretty good in the Hoofdklasse. He pitched D1 in America a couple years ago, and he's had good results in international tournaments. Like I think he did pretty decently at the Premier 12 in Handball we call him, but he doesn't his swing and miss from the Hoofdklasse doesn't really translate as much to international competitions. He doesn't fool as many batters. Something I noticed that they did when they kind of switched managers from Hengsley Newlands to the new guy, Evert Jan to Hohen, is that they do seem to be trying to prioritize getting a couple more young pitchers and young players out there, which is not at all what Newlands did. And that was like a huge problem with kind of the latter part of his tenure. Like a guy like Pim Weywinkel and Koen Postelmans and Aaron de Groot. Those are all like younger pitchers who a couple of them pitched in college in America and they're pitching in the Hoofdklasse. And Pim Weywinkel was on the Premier 12 roster. He pitched terribly, but he's someone who they might be trying to get a look at. A guy for me who I'm interested to see how he does is Scott Prinz. His younger brother, Connor Prinz, is a prospect in the Mariners organization. And to me, he's like, when I look at like how he pitches in his frame, like I see the most potential maybe for development, especially with his age. He's only 24, and he pitched in the Frontier League in Canada for Ottawa. He wasn't particularly good, but like he's shown flashes at international competitions. His biggest problem is like his velocity just isn't there. He tops at 90 miles an hour. It's usually sitting like 88. I think he played for Curacao at the last Caribbean Series, not this year, but the year before, and like he was sitting like at 87, 88, but he still picked up some punch outs. So, there's guys here who you can kind of like dream on. Maybe like MPB teams might be looking at some of them to see if like, hey, if they pitch well, maybe we'll consider bringing them in for, a tryout or something. Like Franklin Manherp, who's, Giants legend and nice guy, pitched in indie ball in Japan. So maybe some team wants another look at him for a developmental contract or something like that.
Yeah. I think with a lot of the Czech players, we're seeing this kind of connection start. And as you mentioned, Franklin Van Gerp last year pitching for the Khufu Hayati Ventures, getting to play against MPB Farm competition. So that's good experience to take into a series like this and maybe in the future for like the WBC. Obviously, like guys like Tom DeBlock, Lars Hoyer, like people who have pitched in the Dutch league, it's like they've been there, done that. So, they're not going to be intimidated by the stage of playing in front of, 30,000 fans. It's more about just the younger guys. I think it's really good for them to be able to play, even if it's, a really low stakes kind of environment, being able to play in, a place where 99% of the fans are away fans. Obviously, they're going to be cheering loud for Samurai Japan, and that's really good exposure to that kind of atmosphere, and they can propel that into the WBC. How about on the hitting side? Who would you say are the big names to watch for? Because obviously the one that stands out is Didi Gregorius. You have Jurickson Profar's brother. We have Chadwick Tromp's brother. A lot of I've noticed with the Netherlands and their Caribbean kind of territories, a lot of family bonds, right? So it's a lot of like, oh, maybe I don't quite know this player, but I know who he's related to. So who would you say are the main guys to watch for on the position player front?
Yeah, I think a part of that with the familiar relations is like you look at Curacao and Aruba, these are very small islands. Like St. Martin, like very small island population wise. Like a lot of these guys are even related to each other. Like I know some of them are related to each other. But yeah, it's a big family thing. Like their parents played like both softball and baseball. And that's where you get guys like for instance, right now, Gerangelo Saintia, the guy who just went in the first round, the ambidextrous pitcher for the Mariners, his dad was playing in the Netherlands, and that's why he was born in The Hague. So for me, obviously, Didi jumps out. I think I would like to see him like maybe try MPB. I think there's like he's like 35, but like he does a lot of things outside of the bat that like would probably give him value. Like he's flexible, he can play different positions. His defense is still pretty good. He can swipe a bag or two. He's still, got a good eye at the plate. So, even if he doesn't rake in Japan, then let's be honest, he probably won't. Although I don't think he would be as much of an unmitigated disaster as some of the recent foreign projects in MPB. I'd like to see him at least give it a go. I could see him being like a solid utility kind of guy. I'm like, I don't know. He feels kind of like a Carp, like a solid if unspectacular guy who just kind of like, he's not going to be worth more than like 2.22 WAR and change maybe, but like, he's going to go out there and play a lot and, be a role player. Past him, looking at like some of the guys who I think, are here kind of to like show themselves off in the sense of like maybe they're looking for a deal with like a CPBL or KDO or MPB team or, go back to affiliated baseball. I look at someone like Donovan Antonia, who was a catcher and also an infielder for the Mets and I think the Reds. He never really was like super good with the stick. He was very streaky, but like he's young. He's 21 years old. He just got released. Very athletic. He's a guy you could maybe see, getting a deal somewhere with someone. Another guy I like is Vason Kroos, who is a Aruban playing in indie ball in America right now. He played for the Winnipeg Goldeyes and an 850 OPS. He's got pretty good pop and a good eye, and the American Association is obviously like, nothing to sneeze at competition level wise. I think he had a pretty long double, I want to say it was, in the Premier 12 for them. And he's only 25, so he could be kind of like a America Kloop kind of mold dude. Where some team brings him in to kind of try him out and see if his bat plays. One more guy recently released from affiliated ball is Shervyen Newton, who he played for the Royals. I think he was with the Mets for a while. It's kind of another one of those like utility infield guys. He's shown pop with the bat before. Like he has shown the ability. I think he hit like 15 home runs at single A for the Mets a couple of years ago, like to put a little charge into the ball. He's also 25. He also feels like a guy who could maybe run into one, some sloppily located fastball at this exhibition and, pop it out and maybe turn some heads.
Yeah. Yeah. So you got guys like Delano Salasa and Profar who were there for Europe last year. So, I think it's good for them to kind of get a second crack at it. They're going to be facing different pitchers than last time, but it's the same venue. So again, I think this kind of year after year exposure can only help guys. And yeah, as you mentioned with Didi, like he could have given MPB a shot, I think, like 2 years ago and been like a Freddie Galvis or like a Marwin Gonzalez type. I mean, Marwin came over pretty late, so I suppose he still has time, but he's just a very well-known quantity, obviously. And I think we can kind of look back at the previous kind of iterations of the Dutch national team. You go back to 2017, and they just had an incredible showing at the WBC. This was kind of like their best team ever in a way, with Xander Bogaerts, with Didi, the Scope brothers, Profar, Kenley Jansen, Vladimir Ballantyne was still fresh off his home run title in Japan. Jared Jurgens, who's here now as a coach. Rick Vandenhurk, who was obviously a really good pitcher for the SoftBank Hawks. Tom DeBlock. So 2017 WBC, they lose in the semifinals in extras to Puerto Rico, right? And Japan, also lost in the semis that year. So they technically had the same finish as Japan in that WBC. However, you fast forward to future tournaments. 2019 Premier 12, the Netherlands go winless. They missed the 2020 Olympics. 2023 WBC, they start out 2-0, but then they kind of fall apart and they get eliminated on the tiebreaker. And then the 2024 Premier 12, which we just had a couple months ago, they go 2-3, which isn't bad, but not good enough to get out of the groups. And in the 2023 Euros, that was the first time ever in history that they didn't finish at least in the top two. They usually win or they're runner-ups. This time they were in third place. So what's kind of happened to Dutch baseball over the last 5-6 years, and what do you think about the future prospects?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty multifaceted issue. I think they were probably one of the teams hurt the most by COVID canceling the 2021 WBC. I think they would have probably had a really strong showing there. I kind of think Premier 12 it's a little bit more crapshooty, because by the time it's played, it's like November, and you're not always getting that many prospects because teams are very concerned with workload. Like Ache Fransen should have been on that Dutch team for the Premier 12. He would have been like one of their best relievers, and Antoine Kelly from the Pirates. And, they were blocked because workload, I'd assume. And people are just gassed. Like Tom DeBlock made one start this 2024 Premier 12 against Puerto Rico. He just didn't really have it. I mean, it was in Mexico too, but his fastball was sitting 89. He was clearly gassed after his season. I kind of think it's part of it had to do with roster construction, especially at the 2023 WBC. Ainsley Mullins really was just kind of getting the old gang back together with that one. There were just people on that team who really shouldn't have been there. No offense to Vladimir Ballantyne, but he really should not have been on that roster in a starting capacity. And they got a little unlucky with some prospects not being approved. That's something I've noticed recently. Sam Baldersa, who's currently the highest ranked prospect, level wise in the minor leagues. He's a AAA with St. Louis. He didn't play. He was trying to break a clamp with the Blue Jays, which didn't happen. And Ceddanne Rafaela, who was originally on the, I think he was on the provisional roster, wound up getting told basically not to go by the Red Sox, and he didn't go in 2023. So I think it was kind of a combination of the manager and the front office of the kingdom kind of maybe not playing young players enough, and kind of resting on their laurels a little bit, which to be fair with the Euros, they really had Spain dead to rights for most of that game to go to the gold medal match. Tom DeBlock got injured, and so they had to pull him after 7 masterful innings, and because of that the bullpen blew it, which that sucks. But at the end of the day, it's kind of a ball don't lie, it just be like that sometimes moment. So I think that going forward that they really need to focus on getting younger and trying to get those prospects to play. Drew Jones is kind of saw his stock increase a little bit. Alexander Albertus is pretty nice little infield prospect now for the White Sox. They really need to not be afraid to let their like really young starting pitchers, like complex level guys like Stein Munderschach, Brendan Harbold, and Gijs Bendenbrink go out there and just kind of see what they got, I think. But that's sort of where I am at with the national program.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like a little bit of, maybe a couple wrong decisions, but a lot of bad luck as well. Because, yeah, I mean, looking forward to the 2026 WBC, if they construct their kind of dream team, they're still really good. I mean, if they have the guys like Xander Bogaerts and Ozzy Albies, but also Ceddanne Rafaela and, Drew Jones, as you mentioned, for a while there, wasn't looking too good, but seeing his prospect stock increase again. So I think the Netherlands definitely still have the makings of potentially making some noise at the next WBC. But of course, long term, we have this issue where last year the Curacao and Aruba Federation decided to start their own and kind of split from the Netherlands. So what's been going on with that? And is this kind of a situation where, 2026 WBC, obviously the Netherlands already have a qualification spot, and the way that they're doing the WBC qualifiers with kind of the invites, it seems really hard for new nations to kind of sneak in. But is this a situation where maybe 10 years from now, we're looking at the Netherlands not being able to recruit anymore from Aruba, Curacao, and, its other kind of Caribbean territories? And what would that mean for the Dutch program going forward?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because the issue that has driven the program to this point isn't really a complete unwillingness by like the islands to it's not like they want to be like, hey, no, we want nothing to do with you, get us out of here as soon as possible. That's not really the situation as far as I understand it. It's more so of like hey, we have like this list of things we'd like, and we'd like some more support from you, like financial for these kinds of things. And like, could we at least get these demands met? And the Dutch Federation in Europe is like, no, like not at all. Like, no, we're not doing this at all. We refuse to even negotiate. And that's kind of driven them to this point. It's like, well, we're going to go take Aruba and go off and do our own thing if you're not going to be willing to help us out here, which, I think is very short-sighted. And, it's a very complicated issue that has to do with real life history. The Netherlands not exactly well known for being a how do I put this diplomatically? Nice stewards to their colonial holdings when they were actually part of the Dutch Empire, or even afterwards when those places gained independence. So it's complicated. I think, obviously, it makes the most sense for the Netherlands to try to retain Curacao and Aruba, and I don't really think they're asking for much. Like, I know funding for Dutch baseball has become harder to get from the government because they've been, like, constantly moving goalposts on, like, hey, you guys have to win the Euros, or you have to make this certain, like, put, like, placement for us to give you more money. So, it may not be entirely in the ability of the Netherlands, like, European Federation to like meet those demands. Like, maybe they just don't have any money, but I think it's something they should work together with because losing that and that connection that's gone back forever, because you see guys from Curacao and Aruba going to the Hoofdklasse to play and then going home in the off season. Like, losing all that just like that would be a huge blow. And the European program itself, while in recent years we've been seeing more and more like the Dutch-born and developed prospects kind of like make themselves known, like they're not in the position to just lose like all of Aruba and Curacao and St. Martin, etc.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like then, the territory is trying to extract as much leverage as possible. But, hopefully for the sake of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, they stick together at the big competitions going forward. Switching gears then to the Japanese side of things, Samurai Japan for this series against the Netherlands has put together a really good team. And it's hard to really kind of say, is this, Japan's like B team, C team? Because with, even a team like the Netherlands, I think you can say they put together the best team they can based on availability, right? Like if guys,
Exactly.
if MLB guys aren't available, if prospects aren't available, this is the best team they could have put together, you can say. With Japan, it's like, we're in spring training. Everyone's kind of down to play. It's not like the Premier 12 where they actually had quite a few players decline, which is, that already raised some question marks as to whether Japan, especially kind of like the management here, is kind of falling off in terms of like, oh, are you guys getting too complacent after winning the WBC? You're not putting as much respect onto big tournaments like the Premier 12, because there are a lot of guys that, absolutely should have been on that team and were invited or reportedly were invited that ended up turning it down. Some injuries contributed to that as well, of course. But this current group of guys is really good. And you have your prospects like Hayato Tsunehiro for the Hiroshima Carp, big time prospect from the 2023 NPB draft who's been included over on the hitting side. Another guy from the 2023 draft, Ryuta Hirose. So you have guys who are not very experienced at the NPB level, but then you also have some superstars like Hiroya Miyagi for the Oryx Buffaloes, who, for the Premier 12, Miyagi wasn't there, but you had Hirota Takahashi. So in my view, you're kind of just swapping them out. It's like you have the best right-handed pitcher in Japan, you just swap them out for the best left-handed pitcher in Japan. You got Chusei Manami, who's obviously, both on the field and with his aura, he has, he can draw a lot of fans. And then a lot of the surrounding pieces are just really good in general. I really like manager Hirokazu Ibata's ability to find great, like high octane arms. I think that is one thing I will never be criticizing him for. A lot of kind of in-game decision making, strategy, position player side things. Like there's a lot of things that I take issue with, but when it comes to pitching, he knows what he's doing. He seems to have, archetypes that he likes. He does like high velo pitchers. He likes guys with big strikeout stuff. When it comes to lefties, he's willing to, go for a little more funk. Guys who are kind of heavy on breaking balls. So he does seem to have like a core group of guys that he likes. Tatsuya Imai, he's selected multiple times. Manami is always on the roster. Chihiro Sumida's not on this team, but he's selected him multiple times. Naoki Yoshikawa was supposed to be there for the Premier 12, couldn't make it, so he's here now. I think Ibata, going back to late 2023, which is when he takes over for Hideki Kuriyama, who obviously retired. He has a record of 16-1, including, exhibition games against like the Czech Republic and Europe. However, the one game that he lost was the most important game, as Japan got upset to Chinese Taipei in the Premier 12 gold medal game. So still a lot to prove for Ibata. A lot of fans are not too happy with him. He has his supporters too, of course, especially those who, liked him from his playing days with Chunichi and Yomiuri. But Ibata, I still think it really comes down to this upcoming WBC on what his legacy is going to be. Because, if you do two major tournaments, it's the Premier 12 and the WBC, and you can't win either one, then that's going to look really bad. So even if you win all these other games leading up to those tournaments, it's not going to matter. So Japan in a game like this, in a series like this, the pressure, the stakes are not particularly high, but you still obviously want to see them play at their absolute best. So I guess from kind of a Dutch, like from a Team Netherlands perspective, what do you think it means for those guys to be able to play against like some of the best guys in NPB?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think like for them, it's got to be like a great honor, but also great opportunity to kind of show, the Hoofdklasse is not exactly a well-known league around the world, I'd say. So like kind of show what some of those guys in the mainland Netherlands can do. versus some of this like really, really good competition. Like I remember I called Tom DeBlock was going to strike out Chusei Minami at the global baseball games, and he did. So, not saying it's going to happen again, but it might.
Yeah, definitely. And like you see this with like Andre Satoria for Czech Republic, right? Where if you get that 1K like you did against Otani, it's like that's something you can have for life. Todd Van Stiesel for Australia, same thing, where it's like even if you are not going to make it to the major leagues, it's like being able to strike out someone who is as good, as a lot of these MPB stars are, like that can really give you a lot of confidence and propel you going forward. Who are some of the players that you think, not just like from the Netherlands perspective, but are MPB guys you think really well known in by European players, and like who would be some of the guys that they're most looking forward to face?
I would assume like as the WBC has been more televised and the Premier 12 was had a pretty nice showing this past year, that a lot of these guys do kind of see these Japanese guys kind of playing on the national team and remember them. And there's guys who have played in Japan on this roster, like Franklin Herb. He might have been watching MPD games when he was there. So, guys like Tatsuya Imai and Hiroya Miyagi and Chusei Manami, those are all guys who are really like, pretty well known in Japan now. So like, I would expect like they talk about those guys and they know of them, and they probably are like looking at scouting reports and videotapes, just seeing what they're going to be going up against. Because that's one of the most beautiful things about international baseball is it's kind of an any given day thing. Like there are players who like just absolutely defy the odds, like Duke Herbert for Nicaragua, just striking out Manny Machado and Juan Soto, like just any given day. Like if you come into the game and you're feeling yourself and you felt good in the bullpen and you have a game plan for the guys you're going to face and you execute, you can get anyone out, or you could, catch anyone making a mistake with a fastball middle and send it out,
Yeah. And I think it is kind of baseball in its rawest form, because you can get scouting reports, you can get a lot of the analytics, but not to the same extent you can during an MLB season, for example, right? So a lot of it you're going in blind and you're just kind of seeing like, wow, there is a lot of raw talent on the field. When I was talking to some of the coaches for Team Australia prior to their Premier 12 game against Japan, just kind of hearing how excited they are, knowing that they're the underdogs, but how much it would mean for them to put up a competitive fight. They were going up against Haruto Inoue of the Yomiuri Giants in that game, and it's just like they do all the research they possibly can to figure out like, oh, who is it that we're going up against? Like, it's such a great opportunity for us. So I think a lot of the Dutch players will feel that here as well. And there's a lot of surprise factor as well, because in the WBC, for instance, like the Czech Republic game, Roki Sasaki starts, and obviously he does really well. But then Hiroya Miyagi comes in and he just shuts the door. I mean, he ends up throwing more than Roki in that game. I think he like came in after Roki. Then there was then Utagawa, I think, got like finished the inning for him, and then it was just Miyagi the rest of the way. And it's just like, oh, well, we were preparing the whole time for Roki 100 miles per hour from the right side, and then here comes Miyagi with his huge breaking balls, the slider, the changeup, the curveball, the splitter, the elevated fastball, and they just weren't ready for it. So I think you'll be able to see that in this kind of a series too, where guys like his teammate Ryuhei Sotani, he's really good. He throws low to mid 90s from the left side. He's got some great breaking balls off of that too. Ryosuke Otsu, breakout star for the SoftBank Hawks. Kazuki Sugiyama, who throws upper 90s with a nasty split finger. Daichi Ishii, whose splitter has the highest whiff rate in all of MPB. There's a lot of these guys that Japan can throw out who aren't very well known outside of MPB, but they're going to be getting a lot of pretty nasty whiffs, I think. And then on the hitting side of things, last time Japan played against Europe, I don't recall them hitting a home run. I don't think there was a single home run in that series. So
No,
they want to hit they want to hit some bangers here. So guys like Yusuke Oyama, Teraraki Sato, Ryo Ota, Shun Mizutani, Seiya Hosokawa, Chusei Manami. A lot of those guys, I think, are good candidates to put the ball over the fence. Kyocera Dome is more pitcher friendly. And I think they use I believe they use the MPB balls for this series. So they're looking a little bit less dead this year.
Yeah, the undead spring training balls.
Yeah. So hopefully we do see some homers, because that is always a little bit disappointing when it's like kind of a showcase series like this and there's no long balls. That gets me a little bit disappointed. So I'm hoping we see a lot of the power shine through. Let's finish off today by just kind of looking ahead then to the rest of the 2025 season for both the Japanese guys and the Team Netherlands players. What do you think 2025 looks like for guys like Tom DeBlock? Is he guaranteed to be on the WBC roster, like regardless of what happens, or are a lot of these veteran guys like actually still fighting for a spot, especially with a lot of the more MLB 40-man guys coming in? What is 2025, this series plus the regular season, what is it going to mean for these guys?
Yeah, I think Tom DeBlock will probably be at the WBC regardless. I think maybe guys like Lars Heyer and Sharon Martis are maybe on the chopping block. I know they keep running Lars Heyer out there, and every single time he plays in an international competition, like outside of Honkball Week or like the Euros, he's just bad. Like he was terrible at the Premier 12. He got absolutely blown up by Taiwan at the 2023 WBC. And I feel like if he gets really roughed up here again, like regardless of how he does in the Hoofd class of this coming year, like, he might be on the chopping block. And, Sharon Martis, I made that meme. He's like the embodiment of the still got it guy. But he was really, really bad at the Premier 12, like terrible. And some of that is probably due to he was just out of gas after a Hoofdklasse season, and it's high altitude in Mexico. But he's getting up there in age, and if he doesn't pitch well here against Japan, like he could be looking at not making the team next year for the WBC. And maybe like if you see like one of those young guys, like if Scott Prinz like is really amped up and he's like running it up to like 92 and he's able to get some outs versus Japan, like maybe they'll be inclined to keep him on the roster. He's a guy who I think, another year of kind of like stagnated development could see him lose his spot. I think they're just looking for any of these guys to like really step up so they have like a better idea going into the 2026 WBC, like what they really need to address. Like, is Shervin Newton gonna maybe look a little bit better? Is Dayton Kroos gonna really figure into their plans coming out of indie ball? Because there's plenty of indie ballers who make impacts at the WBC. Like, Chris Quitzer comes to mind for Spain. So it's going to be interesting because there's really not that much international baseball-wise between now and the WBC outside of the 2025 Euros. So I think this series is also going to kind of inform their decisions with that a little bit. And then that will also kind of feed into the WBC.
Yeah, and the Netherlands in the 2026 WBC they're in Pool D with powerhouses Venezuela and Dominican Republic. However, if they manage to sneak out, then, let's say they're the runner-up, they're likely playing Japan in the quarterfinals. That would be in Miami. Last time, of course, Japan got one extra game in Tokyo for the quarterfinals. This time, Japan, as soon as their group finishes in Tokyo, They have to fly out all the way to Miami already. Might be a jet lag issue. That's when the Netherlands can really get them, I think. But it's going to be interesting if there is that rematch because, of course, very different teams, but still this matchup, there might be a few carryovers where they had that experience. As for Samurai Japan, a lot of these guys, I would say, are on the pitching side. There's definitely a few spots up for grabs to where if, let's say, a reliever like Kazuki Sugiyama absolutely blows the competition away at this tournament and he finishes 2025 in MPB as like a top 5 reliever, why not include him for the WBC roster then? You see this in the Premier 12 with Shoma Fujihira for the Rakuten Eagles. He started his Samurai Japan tenure, including the exhibition game against the Czech Republic, with 9 straight strikeouts. So it's just like, okay, a guy like this can just overpower a lot of lesser competition. So I think those types of arms are important to include as well. Guys who are just very safe against a lot of like early tournament competition. And then you have obviously the superstars that you grab from MLB, and then Hiroyu Miyagi, Hiroto Takahashi, like those guys are locks for the tournament. But I do think there's a few guys here, Tatsuya Imai, who definitely should be on the 2026 WBC as well. Over on the catching side, Yudai Yamamoto, I still think should be Japan's starting catcher at the WBC. So he's here for this tournament. He was there for the Europe series as well. I think the tandem should be him and Shogo Sakakura, who was, named to the all-world team at the Premier 12. I think that's a really good tandem, both defensively and offensively. Infield-wise, it's always hard to, make the team when you have Munetaka Murakami and Kazuma Okamoto on the corners, although I would say there's probably, it's non-zero chance that Murakami declines because he is going to MLB. So, maybe he decides like, I want to focus on getting ready for the MLB season, in which case someone like Teruaki Sato, the door is open for him to have like a 40 homer season with the Hanshin Tigers and make the team. Outfield obviously is incredibly stacked. We saw Yuki Yanagita, the legend, say the other day that he is also trying to get onto the team. This is his last chance here. He's going to be 37 years old, but it's like, my goodness, at that point you have all the MLB guys, Masataka Yoshida, Seiya Suzuki, Lars Nootbaar. You have Kensuke Kondo, the number 1 player in MPB. It's really hard to find a spot in that outfield. But man, I would love for Chusei Manami to be there and be able to show off that arm. Otani obviously kind of clogs up the DH spots. So, the outfield, there's only 4 spots, and then they like to have that kind of utility man like an Ukyo Shuto for both speed and defensive versatility. Samurai Japan's a really hard team to get onto, so there's only like 2 to 3 spots really like up for grabs for kind of lesser players, but I definitely think that you can only help your chances if you perform well at this tournament, or this series rather.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have if you're Japan. Whereas with the Netherlands, like I was working on a potential roster for 2026, and I was like talking to Jeff Duda, and we were like, so looking at the bench, like just major question marks here. Like some of the pitching options not super great. So it's good for them to have that problem. I am interested to see what Ibata does with rostering MLB guys, like some of the like less superstar-y MLB guys, like say Shinosuke Ogasawara, has a decent year, like he's the perfect pitcher for the Nationals because they don't care how hard you throw ball 4, and he's not going to be throwing ball 4. We're like, I don't know if what if something crazy happens, like the Mariners finally turn Shintaro Fujinami into like a consistently good reliever who's like throwing 104 miles an hour, like Munoz. Like, is he going to roster guys like that over MPB guys, or heaven forbid Koyo Aoyagi has a good year, the most Phillies Japanese player of all time with that hairline and his pitching style. I'm kind of interested to see what they do with those decisions.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. And the last time in 2023, they had like 6 or 7 major leaguers, but obviously they probably will have more this time. That being said, you still do have to strike the balance of like making sure you don't lose your kind of identity with losing the NPB guys. And I think the problem that some fans had initially with Lars Nootbaar's inclusion wasn't that, oh, Lars Nootbaar wasn't born in Japan, he's not even Japanese, that kind of thing, which, has some kind of racial undertones to it. It was more so, why don't we select Koji Chikamoto for the Hanshin Tigers, who's a star in Japan, and like, oh, Nootbaar hasn't even proven himself in MLB yet. Why are we taking him? That kind of thing. And so I think if a guy like Yuki Matsui, a reliever for the Padres who was there for the last WBC, let's say he just has kind of a decent year. I think Ibata's first choice should be to look to MPB. So there's plenty of good, kind of left-handed pitchers there who, if the role on the WBC roster isn't going to be that big anyway, why not get the lesser guy more experience, especially when he might even have more upside there to tap into. And I think with guys like Ogasawara and Aoyagi, Fujinami, I think Aoyagi and Ogasawara, I would say with very high certainty probably won't be there. Granted, his selection process will be different than Kuriyama. Before Kuriyama, like, he didn't select Yusei Kikuchi the last time, and Yusei Kikuchi was actually like half decent, with like a lot more kind of like high velo to tap into, like one of the few kind of hard throwers from the left side that Japan can offer, and he did not select him. So I think Fujinami, maybe just because Fujinami is so explosive, like he would be, if Roki's not there, he would be their hardest thrower. So I think that could be a potential avenue. And then I even think guys like Masataka Yoshida are not guarantees just because no positional flexibility. And if Japan obviously wants to have like defensively sound, like that's kind of the Japanese way of baseball, is like, oh, we play fundamentally sound. And if they think that Kondo is better in left field than Masataka Yoshida, which he is. I mean, he's much better defender, and I mean, he's putting up kind of like what the type of numbers Yoshida put up when he was in MPB. It's like, then why wouldn't you just go with Kondo over Yoshida, and then give yourself kind of an extra roster spot for someone younger like a Chusei Manami? I can see that. Obviously, if Yoshida, it's all up to him. I mean, if he puts up an 800 OPS with the Red Sox this year, he has his best season yet. It's going to be really hard to pass up on him, even with the defensive shortcomings. So Nootbaar, I know someone like Stephen Kwan obviously wants to be there, but it doesn't look like eligibility-wise he can be there. There's a ton of choices for Ibata to look at, but I think it's kind of like you select all the MLB superstars that you absolutely can't pass up on. You ask them, as long as they say yes, you include them. And then for a little more of some of the fringier guys, I think it is smarter for Ibata to look towards MPB first, especially in this kind of era now where you have guys like Roki getting posted early, and there's already a little bit of controversy around like, oh, is MLB completely starting to overshadow MPB? I think like the Japanese baseball federation really would prefer if he gave a lot more MPB guys the opportunity.
Yeah, that's an interesting. It's interesting to think about, like, deciding who to go with over certain people, because I saw like Jeff Duda made his potential Japan roster, and I think he had Kodai Senga as a starter, and I was like, would I have Kodai Senga starting over like Hiroya Miyagi or Hiroto Takahashi? Like, yeah, his stuff's pretty good, but like there are just times where he just does not have it. Like, he just does not have anything like control wise, or the fastball is just like middle, even though it's like 97. And I'm like, what are they going to do with that? Are they going to say, hey, we're doing in 2017 again, you go to the bullpen, which would be cool, kind of. Yuki Matsui was actually on the 2017 roster, which I only remembered today because he pitched against the Netherlands in that game.
Right.
Fun fact, you want to know who Tom DeBlock struck out as a 20-year-old in that game they played?
In the 2017 WBC?
Yes.
Now, who was it?
Nori Aoki.
Nori Aoki. Oh my goodness. That was the one MLB inclusion from that 2017 team. That was the only Japanese MLB player on that team. And yeah, look at them now. They have so many more MLB guys. So yeah.
Yeah, that's. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Tom DeBlock, he goes back a long ways.
Yeah, he is my goat for one of my goats for a reason. Yeah, but I love Otani like really kind of leading the charge and being like, hey guys, no, we're not doing 2013 or 2017 anymore where we have these guys who just like don't show up. No, like everyone like show up for this because, that's what like this is all about. And that's super cool. I wonder if they'll bring back Darvish. I think the team dad needs at least, one more tournament, hopefully. But I don't know.
Yeah, and Darvish and Otani were huge in terms of the level of like analytics and data they were trying to introduce into Samurai Japan. I know they were rather unhappy when they first came into camp, and they're like, "Excuse me, where's all the like TrackMan and Statcast?" And like that was a lot of that was missing for Japan. Always kind of has been. But then as camp went on, you started to see like, oh, Roki Sasaki working on kind of like pitch design with Darvish using Rapsodo. So I think a lot of those, Senga's talked about this, like the level of information in MLB is obviously much better. That's one of the downsides of MPB is a lot of these teams haven't really gotten on board with that, with the analytics wave yet. So that's one of the shortcomings of MPB. However, a lot of the MPB players are also going to be just more in tune with kind of like how like the trends are in terms of like how they're playing and how they're approaching hitters from just kind of the Japan perspective. Whereas a lot of the guys that have gone to MLB have fully kind of bought into the American way to play. And yeah, I mean, someone like Senga, I think if he has kind of like an injury riddled season, I'm not talking like last year where he didn't pitch at all. I mean like he throws like 80 innings and he's like decent. I think then I probably wouldn't include him. But as you said, it's kind of volatile, kind of risky. I would even go with Tatsuya Imai over him, who is kind of the same, archetype in terms of like a hard thrower, 95, 96 on average with some command issues. Mostly because like Senga, obviously he has the ghost fork. Almost all of Japan's pitchers have the splitter. Imai is a slider pitcher, so I think it gives guys like some different looks. I think that's another thing that Ibata has to consider is obviously, I mean, the splitter is such a dominant pitch in general, but if you have an entire 13 pitcher roster where everyone's main pitch is the splitter, probably better to diversify that with like at least one or two guys that are giving you a different look. I think, Shunpei Yamashita deserves to be on the team as well. I mean, he's my kind of pick for a guy that's going to just have an absolutely amazing season and end up being one of the starters for the 2026 WBC. But yeah, I think that with Ibata, finding that balance is probably the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's some concerns with Ibata, but like, it could be a lot worse, right? But yes.
Yeah, definitely. I think more so than Ibata, a lot of Japanese fans hate the fact that Makoto Kaneko from the Lotte Marines is here, who just absolutely loves the bunt. I mean, he loves nothing more than the bunt. Like 90% of practice is just bunting. So, look, like if you're trying to drill some like minor leaguers on doing the fundamentals right, perfectly fine for Japanese baseball. But you're talking about Samurai Japan, where none of the players on this team should be bunting in any capacity. It's like they should all be good enough to swing the bat. Why is he on the team? And it's like a lot of fans, their worst nightmare is like imagining a scenario where a good hitter like Manami has to drop down a bunt. It's just like, wow, that's literal nightmare fuel. So hopefully we're not going to be seeing that. But yeah, I mean, Japan brought in some new blood into the coaching staff with Atsushi Nomi and Nobuhiro Matsuda, both guys who played on the national team when they were younger, recently retired, kind of fan favorites. Granted, I don't really know what kind of qualifications they have to coach necessarily, but I think it helps the PR angle to include them. So Yeah, I think Japan versus Netherlands is going to be a really good series. I will hopefully be covering it in person. But any final thoughts, Jacob, and plug where people can find you as well.
Final thoughts is that Henri Franson is going to win tournament MVP at the 2026 WBC. Um, yeah. People, you can find me at the Frilled Shark on Twitter, X. It's all just one word, all lowercase. You can follow me on YouTube at my at is Frilled Shark Baseball, but if you just type in the Frilled Shark, you should be able to find it. In my podcast called The Giant World of Baseball is on Spotify and YouTube. It should be up on Apple Podcasts sooner or later, where I have guests over to talk about international baseball things going on, like the shortly upcoming 2025 WBC qualifiers. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And I am sure we will be talking again in the very near future for the 2026 WBC, as well as some other topics pertaining to international baseball. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.